I'm Frank Scarcello, and you're watching Frank Conversations, and it's my pleasure today to have Minister Patty Hajdu here with me today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Frank.
I haven't seen you in person since you've been elected, so congratulations on your election.
Thank you.
And your appointment.
Thank you very much.
Good for Thunder Bay, and good for you and good for Thunder Bay.
Good for all of us. It's an exciting opportunity.
Absolutely. So today I want to talk to you about three promises that your government has made: the national inquiry, infrastructure, and marijuana.
Okay.
So if you could tell me, let's start with the national inquiry.
Absolutely.
I know that that the first phase has been wrapped up, the pre-inquiry phase. So tell us, how it went so far and where you guys are at.
Okay. Well, good. It's been an incredible honor, first of all, to be on this file. I mean, it's something, the incidence of violence against Indigenous women and girls is something that I dealt with profoundly in my former role as the Executive Director of Shelter House. Nonetheless, even with that grassroots knowledge, traveling across the country and listening to families from all parts of the country talk about all of the things that have contributed to either the murder or the disappearance of their loved one has been incredibly profound. And so we've heard from over 4,000 family members in person and an equal number of submissions online in terms of what kinds of things the inquiry should be looking at, who they'd like to see leading the inquiry, the scope of the inquiry. And of course, we've also talked to experts. We had an opportunity to meet with a number of experts, lawyers, commissioners from previous inquiries that gave us generously their time on one weekend at Osgoode Hall. So we've heard from some experts as well in terms of design. And so now the job is really to take all that feedback, really start to assess the themes, and then come up with a plan in terms of moving forward. Inquiries can take a number of directions. There's, of course, a formal inquiry under the Inquiries Act, but there are a number of other ways that inquiries can be designed. And so from our perspective, we want to make sure that this inquiry results in tangible actions that will actually work to eliminate this phenomenon.
I guess you were consulted with the British Columbia inquiry that was, I think, 2012.
The Opal inquiry, yes.
And it looks like you got the advice of, make sure that you have a pre-inquiry phase. And because that one apparently didn't, is it safe to say it didn't go that well, or?
There were a number of problems that, in hindsight, I think had the commissioners designed it differently or the province designed it differently, they may have been able to sidestep. But we really want to learn from their lessons, and they were both of the gentlemen that were leading the inquiry were very generous with their time to share with us really from their perspective what went well and what didn't go so well. The difference, I think, one of the things that will be different for our inquiry is that it is truly a national inquiry, and as you know, we were in Winnipeg on the weekend. We secured the agreement of all of the provinces to provide full cooperation to our commissioners,
so that everybody's on board.
That's right, and that's going to make a big difference because some of the issues around child protection, even provincial policing, those kinds of things, we really wouldn't have been able to fully examine if we didn't have the cooperation of the provinces and territories.
So a national inquiry, can take many forms. They have the power to subpoena. They have the power. People are witnesses are under oath. And so there's a lot of the structure has yet to be determined, though.
Absolutely. We're not sure yet how we're going to design this. I mean, one of the things that we want to do is give the commissioners full license to
and how many might you have?
We don't know yet. I mean, it could be one commissioner, it could be more than one commissioner, but at this particular time, what we really want to do is, design the terms of reference and the scope. What do we want to look at? What should be covered under this inquiry? Who should lead it? And then basically let them take it and shape it. And we know that they'll have perspectives as well that they'll bring because these, commissioners are generally people that are well steeped in the issues and the laws.
And they'll travel around the country. Now, once it's given to the commissioners, you guys pull back?
Government steps back, yeah. And we heard that really clearly from the family as well. I mean, the families as well, there's a desire, of course, to hold government accountable. And so it's very difficult to do that if government is leading the process, which is why traditionally the government, once the commission is designed and the terms are set, the government will step back so that those commissioners have full reign, just like in the TRC.
And projected time frame is around a couple of years?
Yeah, so we hope to have a plan out with announcements about who will lead the inquiry by the month of June, and then from that point on, we're looking at about a 2-year process.
Okay. Now, in your opinion, what are the pitfalls that you want to avoid, or you're trying to avoid?
Well, we definitely want to be able to, as I said, look at all of the systemic pieces that go into this national tragedy, but we also don't want to get so broad that we lose focus on the specific mechanisms that lead to a higher rate of violence for Indigenous women and girls, and also some very specific actions. We want to make sure that we reflect all of those recommendations that have come through and all that evidence that has come through other processes. So things like the TRC and the Royal Commission on Aboriginal People, that's very good work, and we want to make sure that we enfold those things without having to repeat all of that work, because it would just become too onerous, right? So from our perspective, we want to stay very, very focused on this particular phenomenon, acknowledging that, of course, all of those other things contribute to this incident.
And so what do you say to the critics who say, this is a waste of time? We already have all the information, we know what the problems are, and there are critics out there, what do you say to them?
Well, first of all, I'd say that this was something that not just Indigenous families and communities called for, but Canadians called for repeatedly throughout the previous government, and then of course through the election, and it's a key component of our platform, our commitment to a restored and renewed relationship and to reconciliation. So I would say, first of all, that this is the respectful thing to do. I mean, this is something that people have been saying has to stop, and so our commitment is to work in partnership with Indigenous partners. But the other thing is that although we have looked at a lot of the foundational issues that affect Indigenous people that lead to all kinds of adverse outcomes, we haven't really examined this particular issue in focus, and that's my goal, is that we do that.
Now, the last question is I don't want to be insensitive in terms of it's not about dollars, but taxpayers want to know. Some taxpayers want to know, what could this cost? I know the number of missing and murdered could be much higher than anticipated. So this could cost a lot more. And I know Carolyn, Minister Bennett, when asked, is 40 million, is that the budget? She said that, well, that's a start. So some people might interpret that as saying, oh boy, and that could be a pitfall for your government, is if it turns into $200 million, politically, from a political point of view, that could not be a good outcome.
Well, one of the things I would say is that we have committed the $40 million, and that's the planned spend. I mean, we'll have to assess as we go along. Certainly, we don't want to, we don't want to limit the commissioners by having a hard stop. But on the other hand, we definitely want to do it in the most financially respectful way. So it'll really be something that we'll have to assess as we go along.
Any comment about the Ontario's plan that they just released against Indigenous women? I think it's called what's called Walking Together. They just released their plan. And one thing I noticed, Patty, was it's $100 million. 80% of it is for support.
Yes.
Because it's a huge problem. It's a huge problem around the world, right? Not just in general. And I looked at it and I go, and only maybe less than 20% is actually prevention. Is that the right balance?
Well, I think when you're speaking about, I really can't comment on Ontario's perspective to a great degree, but I actually think that we need to broaden the concept of prevention to include things like housing and running water and affordable education. And so the province, just like the Government of Canada, is recognizing that those social determinants of health play a much bigger role than any specific program would in preventing violence and preventing all kinds of adverse health outcomes. So when you look at the province's announcement around making tuition more affordable, for example, that's the prevention spend, because that will apply to all people. And when you look at the commitment of the province to working with the federal government on improving conditions for Indigenous people in First Nations across the province, those are the prevention pieces. So although it may not be wrapped up neatly in that particular approach, when governments are committed to creating a better standard of living for all of their citizens and a more equal standard of living, then you're going to start to see that prevention piece kick in.
I think also that we need some men to step up. I think if you look at south of the border, Vice President Joe Biden, there's a big issue in the United States that he's tackling with sexual violence on campuses. It's just men have to stand up, okay, and start to condemn this type of behavior. I don't see that in our country.
Well, we're starting. The conversation's starting, and we have some work that's been done through the White Ribbon Movement, which is run by Todd Minerson here in Canada, and that whole movement is actually addressing the effect of violence on and the intersectionality of violence with men. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this isn't a conversation that's going to be solved solely by women, obviously.
No.
And so, but part of it is really how do we teach our boys, right? How do we teach our young boys how to think about their own masculinity in a different way, how to act respectfully to the women in their lives, and part of it is the broader context of the culture that we live in.
Yeah.
How do we be more critical about the kinds of messages that all of us receive around gender?
And that's part of your whole file as Minister of Women, Gender Equality. I came across this UN Women. That's exactly what they're talking about. We got to teach our young boys about gender equality, and work a little bit on what we find acceptable or not acceptable in this culture. I mean, there are stereotypes and that are rampant in this culture about what women should be or shouldn't be, and so we need as a whole to be more critical about those kinds of messages. And I think Joe Biden's tagline is it's on us. You know what I mean? Men have to talk to other men when they see something or hear of something. You gotta call people out. On stuff like this. Anyway, we could talk forever on this, and we'll talk some other time about as you move forward. Now let's talk about infrastructure. Okay. March 22nd, the budget comes out. The taps will be turned on. Municipalities are all eagerly awaiting for the cash. It was a big promise.
It was a huge promise.
Huge promise. It was very clever strategy by the Liberal Party. It worked very, very well. And actually, when you look at it, whoever came up with that strategy, they should be patted on the back, because the economy has slowed down dramatically. So you would have had to spend this money anyway, whoever would have gotten in. So so let's talk about the infrastructure money. We know what infrastructure is. People seem to have a broad definition of infrastructure nowadays. They want to include everything in infrastructure, but traditionally it's roads and sewers and stuff like that. So you met with the city. Mm-hmm. They gave you their wish list. Mm-hmm. Probably now, what is MP Patty Hajdu's wish list?
Well, I mean, we've set forward an ambitious plan, and that it's divided into different sectors. I mean, we've got a social infrastructure spend, and we've got a physical infrastructure, and we've got a green infrastructure, right? So there's different pots. So my hope is that we do move forward on some of the really significant issues that we've seen here in Thunder Bay, and one of them, of course, as you know, that's near and dear to my heart is the issue of affordable housing. Mm-hmm. So, and I know that's a top of mind for the city councilors as well, that there are a number of social problems that are, in some cases, directly related to the lack of affordable housing, and I think our government is committed to prioritizing those kinds of things. The municipality is going to have to work with the province very closely. There'll be different kinds of streams of money, and so some of it will be accessible to municipalities directly, and some of it will be accessible through provincial coffers. So my job is really to advocate with the city to make sure that they get what they need. And from my perspective, we've been very clear about what our problems are, and we know what some of the solutions are. So the first couple of years, we'll be really looking for shovel-ready and shovel-worthy projects. So it really isn't about brand new builds likely in the first couple of years, although there'll be some transit spends in larger cities. But in our community, we'll have to look at, well, what can we do right now so we can, as you said, get those taps flowing in terms of investment into our community, but then also start to address some of the things that we see we need immediately.
Right on. Okay, well, we'll move on to the final promise, and it's the marijuana legalization. Is that on the back burner or the front burner?
Oh, it's clearly on the front burner. Okay. I mean, Minister Philpott and Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould have a shared responsibility, along with Minister Goodell, to address this. And in fact, I think you may have seen that former Police Chief Bill Blair is leading the marijuana profile and has started working with the provinces, territories, and his parliamentary colleagues to start to really examine the, how we're going to go forward. There's no question that we're going forward on this issue. We just want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that meets the goals of why we want to legalize.
It's a new, there are models out there, but it's totally brand new, so you have to take your time. You just can't jump into it. Okay, it's legal, and everyone just open up shops all over the place.
That's right. And so our perspective is, of course, as you know, that we want to keep it out of the hands of young people, and that we want to keep it out the profits essentially out of gangs and organized crime. And so from with those two goals in mind, we're looking at how we can do this in a way that protects the health and safety of Canadians, but also moves forward in a logical way, so that, as you said, that it's not bedlam and that we actually have a controlled process. We've done it before with other substances. We've done it with alcohol.
Yeah.
We can do it with this substance as well. And what I really commend Mr. Blair for his very thoughtful approach. I think having someone with an expertise in enforcement leading the way
is
he really is the right guy.
Yeah.
He knows a lot about the pitfalls of criminalization of substance use, and I think he's going to do a phenomenal job. As you know, with our municipal drug strategy, we had a strong leadership component from our local chief of police, first Bob Herman, and then Chief Levesque, and that was very helpful to us, actually, because that lens and perspective that law enforcement provides often gives the community the assurance that this is going to be done in a safe, solid way.
Well, it's going to be tricky, because you want to capture as much. All of a sudden we're talking about something that's illegal, but when it's legal, you want to capture as much of the market as possible. And I think those people, because at the end of the day, we're looking at significant tax revenue for the government of Canada. Estimates range from $5 to $10 billion. So, we know why the government. That's another reason why the government is doing it. It makes sense from a society point of view, but it's going to generate some good dollars. So, on a more lighter note, I know you are. What do you think of the circus south of the border? Do you have time to even look at that?
It's really not, I suppose, my job to comment on American politics. Certainly, we're hoping for a good outcome that allows the relationship that our Prime Minister is developing with, for example, President Obama to continue, and that allows for our two countries to work very closely together. I mean, really, this is his portfolio, so to speak, is international relationships with other countries, and I've been so impressed with the relationships he's building in places that we haven't seen a very good relationship for years. And so our hope is that whoever is elected, that he will be able to continue to build those relationships. And knowing our Prime Minister, I think he will be. He's an incredibly great leader. He's got a way of connecting with people that's very authentic, regardless of their position. And so I have all the confidence in him to be able to do that.
Well, after today's Super Tuesday, and it looks like Donald Trump it could bulldoze right through that primary process, and I give Prime Minister Trudeau a huge amount of credit, because when he was at last fall, when Trump made some outrageous comments, the Prime Minister restrained himself and chose to be didn't say much. But whereas other leaders put their foot totally in their mouth, because quite frankly, after tonight, he might have a 50-50 chance. So Donald Trump might be coming to Ottawa, and one of these days, and Trump and Trudeau, that kind of has a little bit of a ring to it. Trump, Trudeau.
Well, look, I think the thing is that we need to work with all countries, regardless of perhaps political differences. And the challenge is, of course, when we have philosophical or value-based differences, how do you develop those relationships? But like I said, I have confidence in the leadership of our Prime Minister, and I know that he's got a very strong set of values that's guiding his work and the work that we're doing in terms of government. And I can't see that changing. So I'm very comfortable with his leadership.
Absolutely. And tomorrow is International Women's Day.
Yes.
Have a great International Women's Day tomorrow. Thank you for coming in.
No, thank you very much.
Enjoyed that very much, and hopefully we'll be able to chat again in the future.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Very good. So you've been listening to Frank Conversations with Frank Scarcello, and with Thunder Bay Live at the Renaissance Cafe. See you later. Bye-bye.